Broadcast for the Fora. And tonight we're going to talk about an epiphany I recently had about Prac and Macrobius and Kane. And I realized that all of the three of them, it's not a very good sentence, is it? All of the three of them. I've been around one too much.
All three of them.
Yeah. All of the three of them. It's like English wasn't my first language, but became my first language because I forgot my second language. That doesn't apply to me. It applies to people I've been hanging out with. Anyway, you know, it's clear that these three, this trio, this infamous trio, the good, the bad, and the retarded, and it's anyone's guess which is which, or the good and the bad, or you have, wait a minute, the demented, the demonic, and what's another sobriquet that begins with D, the damned. And it's anyone's guess again which is which, the damned, the demented, and the demonic. Which is which? In any case, in all seriousness, they all have social anxiety. They all have the same social disease, if you will. And I found this very interesting, and I wanted to talk about it a little bit because it's so abundantly clear that this is the case, and yet nobody sees it. And, people harass Kane. I harass Kane, only because he won't shut up some of the time. When he's relatively quiet, it's no problem. It's when he tends to run his mouth in my face that I have a problem with him. Otherwise, if he's just posting about communism or whatever stupid revelations have come into him while eating Cheerios in his parents' basement or his mother's basement since his parents are divorced. His father got a restraining order against his mother as soon as Kane was born. So it was a big problem. But in any case, I think I said that already. But it's very interesting. These three guys, they're such divergent figures. You have Prac, the Marine, the alleged man of action, the quintessential American boy. He goes from the Boy Scouts to the Marines to working in the Detroit factories to being a hardy plainsman in Michigan. And none of it's real. It's all a lie. It's all a facsimile. It's all a distortion of the truth, if you will. Then you have Macrobius, who is the world's greatest Latinist and computer programmer, supposedly. He can't program anything, turns out. He can't do any languages, programming languages. He can't, he's using the cheapest possible of everything because, he really doesn't know how to do anything that a guy like Flack, who only came to the internet in the year 2000, can do. A barely computer literate guy like Flack can do the same things Mac can do. Or a self-taught guy like Pastor Lindstedt can do better than what Flack can do. So the point of the matter is that, he's not very good at what he does. Neither is Kane, neither is Prac. But they all have something in common, and it is that social anxiety that's becoming more and more present. This is, I didn't fully realize this about Prac. We're going to focus on Prac for a while. I didn't fully realize this about Prac at once. It took, I started watching his videos on YouTube, and I realized this is a timorous character with a sibilant voice, which goes along with my theory that he likes to wear a Sith Lord's outfit and basically grime a worm tongue his way around the circle of crust. I like how I put that. Yes. And so this is what Prac does. You can just picture him with a coal over his head. Actually, there's a damn picture out here of Prac with a coal on his head when he played the Grim Reaper, and so that's how he looks. And when he's whispering into Flack's ear, remember, I'm a Fed. That's always good for a laugh. Just thinking about that made me smell battery acid. I don't know why. It's the fire and brimstone that's coming to Prac eventually. But in all honesty, the point of the matter is that yes, Prac is a Fed. Flack is a, I keep saying Flack. Mac is a failure, and Kane is what Kane is. Obviously, I think Kane is the best of the bunch because Kane is the most honest and realistic about himself. A lot of that comes from being subjected to therapy at a very young age, which Flack and Mac or Prac and Mac were not. How do you have three guys, Prac, Flack, and Mac? I'm gonna confuse this when I'm only using two of them. I'm gonna confuse the third man, so to speak. You know, Macrobius would be drawing our attention to that. The significance of the third man here. We're not talking about the third man. Shut up, old man. That's the way you have to talk to Macrobius because again, I'm pointing out the asinine nature of myself bringing up Flack when I should be talking about Mac and Prac. So they're both frauds. It's my duty to expose them, so to speak. It's my God-given duty to expose these frauds, to expose their travesties of justice against the fora and against the circle of crust. So Flat Prac again has been in the FBI for years, just casually destroying people, destroying lives, and now he's got his witness protection program relocating him to Michigan where he can scout for deer all year round, in his mobility scooter, and he thinks that's a reasonable deal. That's not a reasonable deal, and he thinks after all these years he's perfectly safe. That shows what a toothless circle of crust it is, that a guy like Pratt, who is a professional informer, can feel comfortable in these surroundings. But going on to the other guy, Macrobius. Macrobius is a thoroughgoing fraud in his own right. But again, they've never, ever, ever made an appearance, either with their voice or their face, on any kind of circle of crust online interactive voice presence. So I find this very interesting and indicative of the fact that neither of them or both of them have a lot to be embarrassed about. Therefore, they're afraid to show their face. Now, we've seen Macrobius's face once or twice. I don't believe anybody has heard his voice. I would imagine it's a few octaves higher than he likes to let on, just from hearing it in phone calls and so forth. So I know for a fact that Macrobius is incapable of coming online and debating or talking, or, doing anything that might blow his image on the fora and the circle of crust. And likewise with Prac, Prac is known to be kind of a creepy person. And this is by his own admission. Years ago, he went to a rockabilly barn dance dressed up as a punk and was mad when they threw him out because he lists it in the Salo street fights thread. If you're interested in reading that thread about how he talks about escaping a barn dance or what have you, because he comes stag with another guy. That's stag, right? Yeah, yeah, and it proceeds to get thrown out of the place. And rightly so. But that bespeaks my contention that Prac is a weirdo who doesn't feel comfortable in polite society, and this is why he is so poor at a lot of things, and his ability to interact with other people is so significantly limited by it. So those are the two. Now I remember the time when years ago Mac called Kane's parents, because he was putting a BB gun in his mouth on camera. And, obviously it was not Mac's place to do that, but he did it nonetheless. And, hopefully he lived to regret it. I don't know if he did or not. I do know that Mac has been out of order for a very long time. And if he is a computer program, it needs to be held account in some way. There should be some way of punishing a computer program. There should be a way of eliminating this problem from the public. And so consequently, this is the situation that these people are in now, and this is my point, and that individuals, not often do you have both individuals on the same page paid an equal amount of money or more money by getting away from everything they know and basically starting over again. Now with Kane, he really doesn't have a choice. He had to have good social skills. They demanded it in the what do you call the nut house? In the nut house, in the asylum. 2 beds in Bedlam right now, and they belong to Macrobius and Prac and Kane. So uh, if you're going to, in these circumstances, you can just see the similarities between 3 individuals, and I think it's only a matter of time till all 3 of them end up in a position very similar to the lady who sold her plane and was unkempt and so forth and so on. And we'll see how they handle it. There's some Christianity for you if you want some Christianity. But the reality is, we know it's not going to be handled well. We know it's going to be scotch taped together and rubber stamped by their largely new female staff, which is going to make it easier for them, but harder for somebody who, eventually takes home the wrong horse, who looked good being ridden through in the sale and so forth and so on. But, we get back to Kane, he had a very unhappy, he was the first Omega, he was the first incel. There are a number of firsts for Kane, his first date was a crack whore, in an alley, you know, and so, all these things going on, the reality is that all the things he went through are not so much different than JB or some JB Hunt or some well-known wealthy individual who was able to parlay their misfortunes into something great. And there's a lot of individuals like that. But Daryl has been able to make something worse out of every batch of lemonade or lemons that he's ever acquired or been given. He's managed to make a concoction that is full of brimstone and undrinkable. He's done this many times, and these other gentlemen have as well. They seem to be making money, but seem to is the opposite, op, optimum word for it, perhaps. The best word for it in the circumstances. So it's very, this is where we are at now, and this is what the answer must be. The answer must be, what's going on with these individuals? Why are they so much alike? Why? At least Kane is brave enough to come on camera. Pratt hides behind the camera, and Max stays 200 yards away from a camera at all times to hide his fat. So, there are many sins. People don't get forgiven their sins. You still have to pay for your sins. It's like, say, murder says he confessed Christ. Well, it doesn't matter. You still got to pay for your sin. At the very least with 50 years. At the most, something more severe. But today there's always some reason why it has to work out differently. But today is the day for most people to press forward on things, but not these 3 guys. Daryl and Mac and Prac are very comfortable in their little comfort zones, and outside of that, they are pretty much in their little comfort bubbles. And outside of that, everybody else regards them as severely mentally ill. People tend to forget that. Prac gets around it by waving his FBI credentials around. Mac gets around it by his flim flam, what's the word, chuck and jive routine. I'm a scientist and I know all this stuff. And he only does it in traffic or something where you can't, really, do anything, apropos to enhance the situation anyway. So, in any case, I saw the deal with Kane has changed a lot. Obviously, he's on the floor now. This is not necessarily to disrespect him by saying that uh, Macrobius and Willie are just like him, but they are more like him than they aren't. And I think that's the absolute truth. And I think that everybody must realize this and put out a begging bowl for these individuals because they are going to need help sooner than later, be it their call the place, rehab stays or their jail stays, or the time they need to be spending on their knees praying their children to grow up to be gayer than they already are.